Hello, everyone. Welcome to DGens for a Brighter Future. I'm your host, Jorge, and today I have the man, the animal, the machine himself, Andrew Weiner, Vice President of MEXC Global, coming from a background in sales, publishing, and engineering, and at one point working a stint at Nissan. So, how are you today, my friend?
I am excellent. You left out compliance.
Sorry.
Patent holder of I Comply KYC, which was one of the very first reg tech companies for all of crypto.
Well, you know what? Before we start, that's a great poignant area to begin. Tell us about that experience and how it serves you now at MEXC.
This is my favorite story to tell. So when I first discovered this wonderful industry we have called cryptocurrency, I was sitting in a wonderful bar called Steam Whistle here in Vancouver, and a couple of gentlemen were talking about the Ethereum ICO and how they were going to buy about $1 million each of it. And I thought to myself, where are you going to pay the taxes on an asset like that? And the room laughed. And when everybody's laughter died down, they realized I was serious. And they said, there is no tax on crypto. And I thought, in Canada, capital gains, that's up to 40%. So if there's thousands of people doing what these three gentlemen were planning on doing, that would be millions of dollars that wasn't going to go towards the socialized healthcare system of Canada and a lot of the welfare services and support that you can get just being Canadian and paying into that social contract. So I figured, KYC for crypto is probably going to be a thing in the future. And I went down that rabbit hole of working with the providers of the data, finding APIs from wonderful companies like Thomson Reuters WorldCheck, Comply Advantage, Duns & Bradstreet, Jumio, Trulio, Identity Mind, Idology, and all the major players right now that help secure your personal identifiable information when you onboard anywhere at a centralized entity. That experience is unique because we were doing it 2 years before there were laws for it, which put us a bit ahead of the curve when the laws came on the other side. It also put us in an interesting position to be consultants. We did get to participate in the FATF travel rule that happened in Vienna at the conference. I believe it was 2019 that we had that delegation. And I've always just tried to be a thought leader and one step ahead of regulators and privacy regulators around how do we make sure that we have sustainability in our ecosystem and that they're actually writing laws and regulations that allows us to have scalability, because some of the stuff that these guys have published has greatly limited what you should be able to do as a financial services provider.
Can you dive into that a little bit? When you say what limits you, you just touched on so many things. You mentioned the FATF, bringing in KYC, talking about privacy. So let's start there first. You're saying that some of these regulations can create limitations within the space. So could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So let's first zoom out a bit and give some people that are joining a little bit of context. You see, at a bank, if you're going to open an account, especially an institutional account, and if you plan on transacting in volumes of $10,000 or higher of fiat currency, there are checks and balances. There's regulations and requirements these banks have. The first one's KYC, that's know your client. The second one's AML, anti-money laundering. And the banks do this very poorly. Banks have always struggled with identifying an individual in a digital environment and then checking that individual they've identified for risk and then managing that identity information in the future. We've seen companies like Deutsche Bank get fined hundreds of millions of dollars for failures in their KYC and AML practices and framework for traditional finance. So in our space, cryptocurrency, we have replicated the same ledgers that the banks use as Swift with blockchain, except our money moves a lot faster. And our client base is a lot more distributed worldwide. A bank's clients are typically in the jurisdiction that the bank exists. They can come to your branch. It's a physical location you can see, touch. It's very tangible. So the documentation they're taking from you, sometimes they make physical photocopies and they put them in physical file folders that go in physical drawers. And maybe if they're one of these banks that's tried to digitally transform in the last 20 years, they might have a mechanism for digitizing that information, but they rarely do. So that same requirement is now what the regulators and the government look for from digital financial service providers, or as they define them, a VASP, a virtual asset service provider. Very sweeping definition these days. That could mean a wallet, a custodian, an exchange, payment processors. There's so many people they've just lumped together because they really don't know what's going on over here. They don't have a great IT in most governments. So that's kind of the foundation of this discussion is the banks even struggle to do the basic stuff. Now, when you factor in wallets, digital environments, and servers, where I actually have to broadcast your information for verification, crossing borders, potentially violating GDPR and PIPA privacy regulation between different countries, and possibly putting you at risk if these providers of that information are not encrypting your information in transit, which many of them have only started to do in the last 10 years. So that's the environment that we entered into. Now that we have regulation, we have to know our clients, we have to identify their risk, and we have to be able to associate both those attributes with a wallet. It's a lot of complexity. And here's a use case for everybody in the audience to consider. Let's pretend entity A is an exchange. That exchange is in Asia. Entity B is your client. He's in Europe. And entity C is the custodian. They're in the US. According to FATF's travel rule, the originator and beneficiary information of these transactions we're entering into, these three different entities, you have to share that information across all three in the network. The bank, the custodian, and the client. That all has to change hands. But unfortunately, with Europe, their privacy regulations say I'm not allowed to send that information outside of their country. So how do you meet travel rule if it can't be done within the privacy framework? And a lot of us would say this might be intentional. By limiting our ability to serve people globally, it forces us to work locally and partner locally with the institutions that have lost their market share to crypto. And that's kind of the game right now. They're doing regulation by enforcement and trying to limit us, so that market share kind of creeps back into their books at the banks and the processors that would do this stuff in the country and keep it in the country, and expecting us to essentially outsource or be a third party to, or use a widget or an ACH flow from their tech stack to make this all happen. They don't want to see us accomplish this ourselves and completely cut them out of the deal flow, completely cut them out of the value chain.
I mean, that's a really good point to be made. Like, if we look at the proposition in crypto in particular, it's the velocity of money that is changing. It's the reduction of friction. When I look at the travel rule in particular, it strikes me as just trying to essentially just make the use of cryptocurrency much more inefficient than what it is right now. And you bring up a really good point too about encryption and privacy. I think I want to pick your brain on the FATF, but I want to keep the flow here. With privacy in particular, where do you think we are going? Do you think the travel rule is going to become a standard globally? Will there still be some level of privacy, whether that's encrypting off-chain information, and on-chain information, or is that going to be out of the question going forward?
This is a fantastic line of conversation. So iComply holds a patent on the system and method for an off-chain cryptographic verification, because you're correct. We have to move these processes out of the cloud and off of the blockchain onto the custody of the people that we're checking. And I'll expand on that. So with something called edge computing, I can take a workflow and a process out of the servers, out of the cloud, load that as an iframe directly onto your hardware, your device. Most of our hardware, the processing power is underutilized. It's very readily available in most of the smartphone technology we have today. So by moving that process to your hardware, we decoupled you from the cloud. You're no longer sending your information to some server that could be intercepted, copied, or warehoused somewhere. It's on your own phone. And when you finish that process on the edge, it's encrypted at transit and at rest. So when it leaves the device, you're not actually sending the sensitive images and the sensitive PII. What you're sending is a hash that, according to the risk matrix of whatever entity that set up this compliance process, has assigned definitions to the levels of assurance that each hash means. As an example, if I was just a check cashing store and I'm doing just KYC to know the people, then level 1 assurance might be KYC of an actual person. But if I'm a broker dealer maybe I have a level of assurance that's a natural person that's been verified as an accredited investor, or we verified as not politically exposed. It really depends on the variance in requirements between these different use cases. But this is something that's in progress. You can take these processes, move them to hardware, make the user, the person, the custodian of all the information they wanted to keep private. And then they're simply consenting to sharing the assurance that I have been verified, you can trust me, to a trustless environment.
Right.
Until, God forbid, one day you get audited or you find yourself with the judicial authority trying to figure out what happened in that transaction. At only that time does it make sense for the private keys to be shared, because there's a court document saying you have to. And then everybody involved or named in that court document can access this data, produce it for the appropriate authority for whatever review that needs to be done, and see, has everything, been kept to the up and up. You're reducing like the on-premises function that a lot of banks are utilizing right now to do identity access management, to do risk management, and to like keep their customer data current. Something people forget, especially in crypto, because I've seen this in so many exchanges. KYC is only as good as the day you're in it, because you can onboard a natural person that's clean and risk-free today. They could become a criminal overnight. They get added to a sanction or a watch list or a PEP list, or they get elected for office or something. Immediately their status changes. Does your company have the ongoing monitoring to identify those kinds of event triggers? These are the questions that a lot of my constituents need to look hard at as they intend to apply for and get licensing in places like North America.
And, but just to simplify things for the viewer, so basically what you're saying is that the ideal position for privacy in crypto is that you're only under some type of legal position where you need to reveal that information.
Correct.
Like say a warrant, or you're trying to file your taxes, or you're being 100%. Audited. But then otherwise, the rest should be kept private, because,
at all times.
Yeah, I think one of the really bad precedents that has been set by the U.S. and now forgive me, is it Amsterdam, Holland? No,
Netherlands.
Excuse me, sorry. It's we're sanctioning what is essentially a tool, for those of you that are watching, Tornado Cash, which is open source software, and just like a knife can stab someone, it can also make a great meal. A car can take you somewhere, or it can go and collide into a protest. These are all just tools. And the people who made this saw that there was a demand for privacy. Unfortunately, that's going to be used by criminals. And to the dismay of, I think, the people who made these sanctions, it still functions and bad guys can still use it. Actually, I kind of wanted to hear your comments about Tornado Cash, what you think the outcomes are, especially that they've arrested a developer that did something that, as far as I know, there wasn't a law saying they couldn't do. Maybe you might know more about that. And also,
so I'm not familiar with where they've gone with the enforcement. I do know that they sanctioned it, and they were looking into whether or not it had been used for nefarious and illicit activity. What I have not seen is, have they produced evidence of that in court? Is there any documentation around the enforcement that's been published to the SEC website? These are kinds of the areas that I see some gaps right now. Here's an interesting thing to talk about, though. Let's look at what happened at Coinbase recently with the insider trading, because that's pretty juicy as well, and as relevant to what the regulators are doing to circumvent being challenged, really. This is the way I look at it. So like with the insider trading at Coinbase, they essentially deemed 9 securities without naming the companies of them to give them their day in court to argue that. Instead, they simply said, hey, these are 9 securities, here's the names of them, and here's the individuals we're charging, which just pushes that forward as a decision. We got 9 companies now that might believe they're utilities, that might believe that they are absolutely not securities and they want to challenge the Howey test. But they're not going to get their day in court. And this is going to just go through and be precedent now in the future for the next time that the regulator wants to do this type of enforcement. This is a pretty ugly place to be for a reporting entity, because a lot of this wasn't very clear in terms of the policies that are out there. A lot of this is, presumed guilty without the chance to battle for innocence and that kind of fair consideration by the courts. It's supposed to be justice. So, that's similar to tornado cash. Is like, I just haven't seen the documentation and evidence that they have proven that these nefarious illicit things have occurred, and that they've named all the parties that are now going to face their day in court to argue whether or not that's true. And
but is it, I feel like if you're just a developer, you would have, there's a possibility that you just worked on it with the intention of, creating more layers of privacy. Like maybe you just don't want people to know what's in your wallet, plain and simple.
Totally. Something we saw in the past that was a little unusual is on these points, the regulators are, how do I say this? Okay, if I'm an issuer of an asset or I'm a creator of a software, even though I'm issuing what I know to be a non-fungible token or a utility, if I don't have what's called transfer management in the smart contract, allowing me to actually enforce the rules and conditions of compliance on the minting and transference of that asset, the market can actually get me in trouble, and it will have nothing to do with my own intentions. So some of these use cases, like the ICOs that came out in 2018 and 2019, where they fell into trouble, is their asset, once it was minted and it hit a wallet, it left that smart contract where they had the crowd sale requirements and they were enforcing compliance. Now that asset can freely be traded. And that new wallet owner, unless he's, part of the project team, he really can do whatever he wants with it. If he took it to a secondary market and started trading it like a security, even though nothing in your issuance design or white paper was securitized, now it's a security. And this is the crazy gap in the regulations today, is like transfer management is going to become actually critical for issuers, because if they can't ensure that their design is going to be sustained, if somebody's just going to take it, move it to PancakeSwap or move it to one of these, exchanges, and then just treat it like a security, even though it is never, nothing in that white paper was a security. It's a game token, maybe. Now you're on the wrong side of regulations, and it's only your fault because you didn't have, like, let's call it GPS or LoJack for cars or God mode on the minting and transfer of the asset.
I think that is a very concerning thing that's going on also in regulation. Like some stuff just came out left wing. I was curious on your thoughts of what's going on with BitBuy and Newton out in Ontario, the enforcement for the $30,000 altcoin buy limit. How exactly is that going to function in Canada? Is it like if you buy, like, say, Solana for 500 Canadian dollars and you're already using up all 30,000 Canadian dollars, and say you make a profit, does that mean when you sell, are you going to be able to use, get back some of the money that was part of the limit and you keep the profit, or does the profit get removed from the limit? What is your take on that?
What I haven't seen is how FinTrack is seeing that through. And that's kind of the question. So they write these rules and regulations, they publish them as policy. Now we're kind of all waiting for something to go to court and to see how they handled it. Because this is like the scary part of being a developer or creator in our space, is you actually don't know how they're going to interpret or enforce this stuff. Is this just something where if you mess up, it's a fine? Is this something, if you mess up, you end up on a sanctions or an investment advisory watch list? Like, what is that going to look like on the other side of enforcement? There's not a lot of data on this. There's not a lot of precedents to point to and say, I'm not going to be pretending to be a thought leader on anything that's not clear. There is a lot of gray in our space. And let's say I'm an e-citizen. I'm an Estonian passport holder, or I'm a dual citizen of the US and Canada. Now what matters? What rules apply? Is it just the jurisdiction I buy them in? Or is it the jurisdictions I pay taxes in? Like, if I buy crypto on an exchange in Canada using my Canadian ID, do I have any obligations in the US? All of this stuff is kind of who knows right now. And we do have some institutions like Knowledge Bureau and similar that are working very hard on creating the continuing education that accountants and legal advisors and lawyers will eventually be able to take to earn hours towards some level of crypto license that says that this is a person that can write you a legal opinion on these things. So your company, does best practice and hopefully doesn't find itself in hot water.
Out of curiosity, with all of these moving pieces that are just, going all over the place, all of this gray area, what does MEXC do or MEXC Global, or what do you do exactly to try to float a boat in what feels like torrential waters all the time?
This is a fantastic question. So we stay engaged, we stay in communication, and we try to stay current. So for me personally, I am on every enforcement site from the MAS to the SAC to FCA, like worldwide. I'm constantly looking to see what's coming out from our side of the industry, whether it's at the custodial level, the wallet level, the issuance level, the exchange level. What's happening? Where are people making mistakes? Where are people getting sued or reviewed or audited? And how are we at MEXC staying ahead of that in our roadmap by using great products and services, by building with the best APIs, by ensuring that our customers are receiving the best in identity security and product security and encryption. And that's a proactive job, because this is like a moving target, a moving goalpost in the crypto industry. You know, if we were talking about this in let's say 2017, it's a KYC requirement and an AML requirement, and there really wasn't much on wallets. But today, now I have to actually be able to associate the ownership of a wallet with a natural person we've identified, which is a job and a half in itself. How do you know, unless they're signing with their private keys in MetaMask, that somebody's the true owner of an address? This is like really difficult question to answer now. And there's products and services out there that are trying to help companies, create a framework, have good governance, risk controls, and meet those requirements, like with chain analysis or cipher trace or similar.
Do you think that at some point all of the FATF's regulations are going to be become the standard? When I saw the travel rule in Europe, that kind of freaked me out a little bit. I would hope that that's not what we see in the US and Canada, but
be careful.
What do you think?
Quote. Can't name the lawyer, but there was a lawyer and there was a director of a very famous university in the States. Both held the opinion that with respect to these types of things, the highest standard very commonly becomes a global standard. And what seems like difficult and out of reach today, in a couple of weeks, months, or a year, will just be normal. And they will continue to raise the difficulty on participating in this ecosystem. They want to know that the players in our market that are acting as virtual asset service providers and taking funds from economies have assurance with an A, insurance with an I, and reserve with an R. They have air, so you can breathe oxygen into a struggling or choked ecosystem, the same way the Federal Reserve can breathe life into the markets when there's volatility or instability in any of the framework that they built. Like, look at mortgages. Mortgages completely failed and collapsed. But if that was a stable coin, what reserve would have fixed that for you? That's not something that we get to benefit from, being unregulated and not having those partners in place in crypto right now. So that's kind of our gap. Also in crypto is something people don't talk about a lot. You add up all the tokens, coins, everything in the space, comes in just under $1 trillion total asset value altogether. But you look at these creditors and institutions that are eyeing our space as a product that they can warehouse and offer as a service or sell OTC, and they represent $1 trillion each. So what does this ecosystem and industry look like when there's fiat flowing through it that's equivalent to the number of digital assets in it, which we've never seen before? There is a limit of fiat across this industry today. This is, the ecosystem is not perfectly designed to always be able to sustain unwrapping at $60,000 a Bitcoin back into cash.
I think when we were at Futurist, you really eloquently broke down that it seems that traditional finance is starting to try to onboard itself into the space. We saw Binance partnering with MasterCard to bring in 90 million stores to be onboarded into this facilitation of payments. Excuse me. Sorry, my English failed me. But where do you think that we're going to see more of that? And also, I was very interested to know how exactly that's going to work. In my mind, I would imagine the crypto is sold, turned into cash, then brought to the vendor, or are these vendors receiving the cryptocurrency in question, or what exactly does this onboarding look like in the future?
Let's first start with why these relationships are forming. because that's a great conversation too. And I think it gives a lot of context to your question for people that might just be joining the stream. So in our space, there's a limited market share. There are only so many KYC wallets. And if you're talking about North America, digital wallets itself is a poorly adopted concept. If you look at Southeast Asia, Europe, Africa, digital wallets precede crypto. Digital wallets have existed a very long time. And there's a lot of citizens living in those jurisdictions in the East that have always been traveling to different countries that they need different currencies at any given time. They don't have the convenience of like going to a Forex like I do when I leave Canada to go somewhere for a couple of weeks to just get a couple Deutschmarks for that one trip. They need to have like francs, Deutschmarks, euros, won, yen, like whatever for their international, traveling. And it could be pretty common if you live in, Vietnam or Korea. You probably go to London a lot. You probably go to China a lot. So in a digital wallet, you've always had all these different symbols that were not your local fiat. So when crypto came along, it was just a new symbol and something you use every day. And that's not too uncomfortable because again, it's not your local currency and you're used to doing that. But in America, Canada and the US and Mexico, that's not the case. PayPal, Apple Pay, even the Starbucks card. These things have been around a very long time and they don't have a tremendous amount of adoption. I was in that coffee shop the other day and 8 out of the 10 people in line with me paid cash. When that card system they have provides incredible utility, there's almost no reason to pay cash in that place. You're giving up so much free stuff.
Yeah.
That behavior of the consumer is so different. So e-commerce and all of these unique places that have usurped traditional market, that walk-in traffic, that consumer going to a shopping mall, that buying behavior has gone online. So there's a huge amount of pent-up demand in the ecosystems of e-com. And that could be, companies, probably shouldn't name them, but we all know who the e-commerce platform providers are. So wouldn't it be great and wouldn't it be a quick path to new consumers if you simply started offering crypto through those shopping carts? Because that's a lot easier task than me convincing somebody walking down the street of New York to download a wallet to their phone, which would not be typical behavior for them. What makes a lot of sense is if the e-commerce environment they're already using, like, Bezos' stuff and everybody else's stuff, simply now had new things that I could choose as payment options. Does that make sense? Because that's like a quicker path to adoption. And that's a very quick path to client acquisition because now I don't have to go find, market to, train, educate, and then onboard my own customers. I'm going to like bulk import a data set from my e-commerce partner and immediately have all that information and access. It's like turning on a switch on a floodgate, as opposed to me going through all the friction of finding these people individually and spending tons of money to reach them. It might cost you $200 or $300 per person in the US or Canada to get somebody to try your crypto products. And that includes the marketing, the PR, the SEO, and all the functions that go into getting that messaging to them. Whereas it might cost me $5 per person if I simply partner with a giant e-commerce person or e-commerce platform that already has all that pent-up demand. They already have everybody onboarded. Now we're just talking about a new workflow in their user journey. That's way easier. And that's what we're going to be seeing more of. And that's what a lot of the institutions have been preparing for. So now let's get back to what we're talking about here is like all these big players were waiting to see the all-time high that we had, 60K per Bitcoin. Because when they saw that, they were able to say to all their partners, all their board members, all the people that are invested in them, that they have a fiduciary responsibility to appropriately manage the money of and invest wisely. They can now say to these guys, hey, look, there's real value there. Look at that asset. So if we can get that inventory for a discount, and we know it's worth 60, whatever that discount we get it for, we can serve it with actuaries. We can build risk models and lending models around that gain in value. If I can get a BTC for 20K and I know it's worth 60, I can lend against 40. And that could be tremendously valuable. And not just the lending, because we're not fully regulated as an economy. No one's telling me what I can charge for interest. Who's to say that they're not going to put a 60% APR of some of these crypto-backed loans? Like, there's nothing out there that would tell them that that's illegal at this point.
Right. Absolutely. I think it's interesting because we're getting to witness and experiment with all these financial tools and see sort of the outliers or outcomes that come from them. Degens for a Brighter Future is excited to announce that we are partnering with MEXC Global, one of the world's largest crypto exchanges. And if you sign up with our affiliate link below, make a deposit and start trading, there's the possibility that you could win $4,100. If you're not familiar with MEXC Global, they have a wide range of awesome products for you to use, such as spot trading, cryptocurrency, options trading, ETFs, and even the ability to copy trade some of the world's greatest traders. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, then what are you waiting for? Use our affiliate link below, sign up, and start trading today. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. You know, I think a great segue here is to ask you, with all these challenges that have come recently between hacks and with in particular, the Terra Luna collapse, how has that affected MEXC Global as an exchange, or perhaps the playing field in general for the crypto industry in the eyes of regulators after having seen that and your communications with regulators? No one in particular, but I'm curious.
I would say that in any market, whether it's crypto or traditional finance, nothing's a guaranteed success, and things have lifespans. So, stable coins, for all intents and purposes, are an experiment. It is not something that has been perfected, scaled, and sustained for a decade, that you could point to a chart and say, hey, look at that sustainable growth. We have limited data on what these products are capable of, the performance of these products, and how they behave when they're stressed or strained in a mass liquidation event or a mass dumping as people, look for the next hottest thing. This is still to be discovered. I can't give you a firm answer as to what everybody's opinion is of this. I can tell you that digital currencies now are something that regulators would prefer are coming from these institutions that have, like I said earlier, have assurance, insurance, and a reserve. Because if it does become unstable, it's not just the people that hold the asset, it's the ecosystems built on top and around the asset that could seriously suffer.
Right.
In a country like Mexico, this is actually a really interesting use case. Mexico's way ahead of most countries. Mexico has a full regulatory framework for crypto. And Mexico has probably one of the largest export of migrant workers on the planet, where they send a lot of people to work agriculture globally, where they earn higher wages than they would normally get in country, and they're flying back home. And when they get home, the problem in a place like Mexico or El Salvador or Brazil is that there are criminals waiting for them at the bus station. There are criminals waiting for them at the airport. They know that that plane full of workers in previous times had fistfuls of cash. They were not coming with electronic accounts from Canada, as an example, from the NAFTA agreements. They were coming with pockets full of hundreds of dollars. So that kind of risk, it made a lot of sense for them to move all that to crypto and private keys and things that are a lot harder to just lift from somebody's pocket. And I think those are phenomenal models that we need to pay close attention to for how crypto can be for good. DJ for a Better Future is not just a funny thing to say. That is the thesis of a lot of the use cases that go beyond payments and finance for crypto, because we do find ourselves in the pigeonhole or whatever the word is for it, the phrase, where we're always talking about crypto in the use case of, it's a security or it's a payments product. But it also could be this wonderful way to protect, migrant workers. It could be a wonderful way to transact in art dealing. It could be a wonderful way to even buy real estate and so many other things, other than, again, the two use cases where I was talking about. So let's not lose sight of that there are cool applications that go above and beyond just buying and selling it for a profit.
I appreciate what you said earlier, because that's what I find to be one of the largest gaps within the crypto space is we're very saturated with a combination of people who look with skepticism, and that's part of social media. And then the other part is people who are solely focusing on the profit. But people forget that in the middle, there's this incredibly momentous technology that has been built out of cryptography and has made a much more efficient means to move liquidity from point A to point B. and that can really benefit, I think, just humanity in general, because before you had to lose 10% just to move your money from one place to another, and that's insane. And that whole industry has been basically upended, and I'm curious to see where we go from here.
May I add something to your thought there?
Yeah.
Because here's a real good point of why we get so much friction on the original use cases, and we find ourselves in the weeds. We can't even talk about the things that are like social impact use cases. The gross domestic product, many countries today, is no longer like a physical good that they export. The truth is, things like automotive, things like oil, things like precious metals and minerals, in some countries, these are still great, but in a lot of major economies, they are no longer pointing to that as kind of their main source of income and revenue. So they've all moved to integrity. Integrity is a product now. You know, fees at your law office, fees at your financial institution, these types of things are very important. And crypto usurps a lot of that because it cuts out the middleman in so many use cases and so many types of transactions. And that's something that a lot of countries are trying to protect because they can't afford to lose the last 2 or 3 vestiges of their GDP, which might be fees on KYC, that might be fees on legal proceedings and lawyers and law firms, that might be the fees that come from custody and similar. And the further we move to cutting out these middlemen, the more strain we're going to see on the regular capitalist system.
Do you think, though, that it's like, for example, you could debate that, for example, the US dollar, by being the central currency of the world, is inflating the other currencies of the world because that is the reserve that is held at a central bank, as a given example.
Yes.
So I think like, as you know, people call, like, say something like Bitcoin or maybe Ethereum a hedge against inflation. And sure, we're seeing these downtrends in price, but even then, you're better off having bought a Bitcoin, whatever it was, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, and holding it till today. You still have outperformed inflation. And I'm curious because I think that what we're also seeing is this culture of money change, and suddenly people can communicate and transact with one another without having to be concerned about the economic state of that country, because there's an agreed upon value on that asset across the world. So I think that's a very unique climb, I guess, that we're starting to get into. And I guess I never thought about it in that sense, that a government would be concerned about losing that extra inch. And maybe that's why everyone is fighting for as many inches as they can possibly get, for lack of better words.
I mean, they've identified there's a new type of consumer. You know, they said for many years in a lot of senators' offices that the websites and the internet were a trend and a fad. And that's where almost the entire economy exists now. So, you know, they've been consistently wrong. And the mainstream media has been even worse because at this point, they cannot sell or get anything done unless it's negative. No one wants to hear a good story anymore, it seems.
Exactly.
Or at least they're not willing to pay for it. So they say things like, you know, Warren Buffett will never invest in crypto and blah, blah, blah. And that was kind of their like talking point for quite a while. But there's a couple things flawed with that because, number one, it proves that they don't understand our industry. There has never been a crypto product that was designed for a billionaire, period, full stop. No one ever wrote a smart contract thinking that you're going to invest $1 billion and do 100x and I'm going to give you 100 billion in liquidity. What? That's nonsense.
Right.
They're also wrong about Mr. Buffett. I mean, who funded Nubank?
Buffett.
So like, you can't look at them. They're useless. What we have to rely on as an industry, like these conferences, the meetups, this channel, this is the only place, unless you've got your head in the sand, that you're going to get truth. And truth is important. Is there a lot of volatility in the infrastructure of our industry? Yes and no, because now that the institutions are so bull on crypto and are enjoying this discount right now at around 20,000 per, of the biggest asset, they're gathering inventory. They're buying it by the 100,000. They're not buying 10 or 100 or 1,000 like me or other people. They're buying in the 6 and 7, figure range.
Mhm.
What are they buying it for? If this is a bear market, if this is an industry that you should be afraid of, we're going in the wrong direction. Why are you allocating hundreds of millions to digitally transform your back offices to carry these compliantly, and then hundreds of billions to go get the inventory?
I think
I don't understand that.
I think like one of the most unspoken about pieces of news was when that tweet was released. I think it was CZ, or was it Miles Deutsche? I don't remember, but the tweet outlined all these publicly traded companies and their individual investment portfolios, not within crypto projects, but within crypto businesses. So
Yes.
the upper echelon of investment firms seem to recognize that where they want to be is in the picks and shovels. They want to have the infrastructure. And one of Google's largest investments in their crypto fund is Fireblocks. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're giving all these large hedge funds and institutions a manner of which they can have these assets custodied. And I'm curious to see where that goes. But I think you're right. The writing on the wall is this, although it's a bear market, it could go lower. Nothing on here is financial advice. But with that being said, if you follow where the whales are, if you hopefully did the opposite of Jim Cramer, no offense, then probably you probably are going to do all right. So I mean, that's basically what I've been doing, just accumulating when the prices are low.
So the indicators are there. There are things to watch for. So, CipherTrace was just acquired. Ask yourself why. What is the world's largest creditor preparing for with all the wallet data? Why would they need that if this is a bear market that we shouldn't be investing in? What?
Right.
and whenever it does turn around in the order books and it starts to go back up, be mindful, because if you were one of the people that believed in the original thesis of cryptocurrency, like Andreas Antonopoulos, author of Mastering Bitcoin, a free plug for him, don't give your asset back to the 1%. They're coming for it. There's a reason that the fear is out there. I'm not afraid. My colleagues aren't afraid, but there's large organizations telling me to be afraid. And any time in history, somebody told you to fear something, someone was trying to get something from you. That's been consistent. Also, the head of these creditors, they've made a couple of really good arguments as to why our industry is something that they're going to try very hard to sustain and have a very deep part of. Let's just look at credit card companies. We don't have to name them, but the credit card companies have like 5 billion pieces of plastic in circulation at any given time. Numbered, registered, produced, die cut at a press, shipped. There's costs around the logistics. There's costs around the fulfillment. There's costs around the production of just having a credit card. Now imagine if you could take all 5 billion of those cards and turn them into wallet addresses. How much easier would that be to scale and maintain, especially because there's protocols now to monitor ongoing transactions, expiration dates, and all the things associated with the identity that owns those wallet addresses, that they could save themselves 7, 8, 9 figures a year in overhead just using blockchain. And we talked earlier about, non-financial use cases for crypto. I mean, before I was, in the reg tech space and now in the fintech space with exchanges, I was using blockchains for encrypting medical records. And universities were, using their credentials to go access these very sensitive MRIs of 3D printing models to print like infants' hearts for cardiac cases that were not common in a country like Australia, and reduce the fatality rates of infants by having a heart that you could access from a blockchain to print and practice surgery on. There's just so much good that we can do with this technology, with the infrastructure, and players like Alphabet, others have identified that. There's more than finance here. And although I'm always happy to discuss finance because I am an exchange.
I could tell. Yeah, but I think that we're in the precipice of something huge. You illustrated it extremely well. 5 billion wallets or 5 billion credit cards can become 5 billion wallets extremely soon. And I'm curious to see where that's going to happen first, or at least who will bring it in to the United States. Maybe that's MEXC. Who knows?
And
We'll see.
that the whole shopping cart experience of e-commerce changes drastically when that becomes the standard. And I believe it will become the standard.
No, I think so too. I think so too. Especially if there's going to be a consumer for it, why wouldn't you want to capture that consumer? I just think that's
Also an interesting point. There's
yeah.
there's companies like one of these coffee giants that we kind of mentioned in passing earlier.
Mm-hmm.
They have their prepaid card system. There's like $1.5 billion of unspent upfront paid money in that ecosystem at any given time. That's the loaded value of those cards. That's an incredible mechanism for the stability of the business and its ability to operate and do things for their partners in the value chain by having like capital they can leverage because people have paid them up front for the goods they're going to consume. Imagine we're doing that with wallets and we're doing that beyond coffee. Like there's a lot of applications where that makes total sense, where I wrap my fiat into your platform asset, whatever that is, whether it's a token, a coin, whatever. And I'm never going to pull that back out into fiat. That gives you a lot of buying power, a lot of budgeting power, a lot of leverage power as an institution or as an operator. Of course, the laws around custody apply here, and there may be certain countries where this is not a huge benefit, but there are a bunch of countries you can make that happen in. A use case I always like to point to is when the euro started impacting negatively a lot of the countries that had to adopt it. They immediately introduced Bitcoin debit cards, and I think one of the first of that was Zoid Pay, something we do list at MEXC. You could buy coffee and eggs with your bit, and you can't do that everywhere. That's an awesome application. Just walk into the local coffee shop, order my breakfast, tap my card, and it comes right from my wallet address. That's something I believe, as we talk more about this, will become very common in the Western market soon.
I think too, just especially in an inflationary market where the euro has, for at least in my lifetime, is not parity, with the US dollar. I mean, that just shows like much more demand to try to outpace inflation right now. And when I was in Spain, not too long, actually, let me take that back, Catalonia, I found myself like a beneficiary of that inflation because I came in with US dollars and paid 50 euros for 6 tapas and a bottle of wine, and it sucks because that is a citizen that is not in control of those type of mechanisms in that sector of finance when you have centrally controlled entities that are just printing money out of nowhere. Now, obviously, an modern monetary theory guy here. A lot of people in crypto are like that, but suffice to say, that's a beautiful use case for ZoidPay. That just, for your example, that does make someone's life a little bit easier and a little bit better, I think.
And we also have use cases like Trivala, where if I'm just wrapping into their platform token with my fiat, I'm enjoying additional discounts and benefits on the travel, the luxury, and everything in the tourism industry. So there's just, again, more and more of these businesses that are finding the inroads to create the rails that these financial products and services drive on. And the more brick lane we do, the more pavement we lay, so we can bridge the protocols between chains, the rules between countries, and the registry for virtual asset service providers to actually meet travel rule, making all those things cohesive, the harmony of them. It's a mission worth taking on, and it's something that I hope that we accomplish, as an industry within the next 18 to 24 months.
What do you think is, we're at this point in time, what do you think is the biggest challenge and hurdle that is going to affect the exchanges at the moment? What do you think is the biggest challenge, maybe for MEXC or just for exchanges in general?
Well, I think it's more for the consumers of the exchanges, because the exchanges themselves, we're totally happy to engage, work with, and comply on what's, the model of what we need to be operating in any particular jurisdiction. But the consumers, what we need to see the governments accomplish for the consumer is a framework and a set of rules that allows you to provide them all the services that are available. Because at this point, there are a number of product types and service types that you would be restricted from if you lived in jurisdictions in North America and abroad that other jurisdictions get to enjoy. So like, if your government really cares about its economy, why would it allow other economies to have that type of competitive advantage over you, to have markets that can provide them more value to put them ahead? Mm-hmm. And that's a hard question. You know, I think even the way some governments run in terms of your term limits and how long you get to be in office, it's not very encouraging for somebody with the background that I have to go run and hold office and write the appropriate kind of legislation. You might not be elected long enough to make it happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is kind of crazy how fast the ecosystem and technology moves. Government does not move that quickly. The wheels turn slowly, especially in justice. So this is like the biggest risk right now, is like, how do we create an all-in-one, because every other market's like this now. Like Adobe, when I go buy one of those design products, it's a cloud. It's every service they ever sold, and I can just access it from one point to point, right? And that's kind of the thinking for like even office management tools. Like now they're suites. I'm no longer buying individual products. I'm no longer just doing spot or options or derivatives or ETFs. Like, people are looking for, where's all that one spot? And then if you need to like restrict me from it because I'm not accredited or I'm not sophisticated or I'm not educated, like, you can put those things in place to help me level up. You could put accredited check by InvestReady. You could put restrictions around my type of trading if I have no idea how to set a stop loss. There's stuff that we could do to help facilitate that gradual like leveling up of a consumer from being new to intermediate to experienced, and ensure all along the way that they're protected in the same way that they're protected in traditional markets. And we're looking to government, we're looking to regulators to like meet us there and to help facilitate that, so consumers don't do nefarious or illicit things to access what other people are using to get ahead of them. They want fairness. They want quality and access. They want financial freedom to access wealth. And that's something that just morally and ethically we should all be very united in.
Absolutely.
Banking the unbanked.
I got to say, you're really good at rallying the troops here. There's a reason why you're vice president for sure.
Well, I have passion in this. Look, before I was in this position, I've only had this position since February. I've been in this market for 6 years. I've seen the struggles. I've seen great, fantastic project teams die because, you know, the first 5 years of a startup, especially in this space, are hard. Even with a great idea, you might not make it. And I want to make sure that there is a level of fairness in the playing field. So it's not just, I live in this country, so I'm going to be the best in crypto.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the challenging things. But when I've listened to podcasts between lawyers, it's amazing how many of them, even though ideally we want to keep a lot of this innovation in the US and Canada, and it's amazing how many lawyers are like, are you sure you want to do this project here? Have you not looked into Dubai or the Emirates or something like that? Like, and that's actually quite disappointing, because we want to maintain that innovation. We want to foster it because it clearly can benefit society as a whole, and also in a very ideal way, not to point fingers at any particular government or anything, but ideally in a place that's more free and where people can make their own decisions. You know, at least that's what I think.
Well, the hidden risk of what you just touched on is you're also going to lose the technical talent.
Absolutely.
They're going to go work for the companies that are innovating, and that knowledge is going to get transferred to potentially competitive markets, that markets that are not looking to favor North American jurisdictions. Do you really want that to happen? I mean, we already have a genius visa in the US where it's like a lottery system to get really brilliant people in here to bring that trade skill, to bring that tech knowledge. But now we're just losing them again. We're bleeding some of our best innovators, some of our best people, some of our best teams into markets that are adversely against the success of ours. And we could put a stop to that. We could do things to be more supportive, to incubate, to educate, to facilitate. This is very poetic, right?
Right.
All of this value that we're just giving away because I can't tell you. I honestly don't know the reason other than lack of knowledge of why they're allowing this to happen.
But I think at the same time, there's definitely voices in the background for good or bad. I think the speed at which CBDCs are being pushed out around the world, and even the conversations that are going on in the ECB, within the ECB, the FATF, the World Economic Forum, it shows that despite what the narrative is on the media, whether you're a right-leaning or left-leaning person about politics or whatever, in the background, crypto is becoming a massive part of this conversation. Because in my opinion, Bitcoin is a tool that is meant for good. It's meant for people to be able to hold and store their wealth and transfer it between someone else. Very simple use case. And I think there's a problematic movement behind closed doors where people are trying to turn this into a tool for control. And that is a very concerning thing. But just adding on to that, especially in the Americas, that's why we would want to have this technology here before it can be exploited in a terrible way. I mean, it's just a tool. We want to be able to understand and have that tool here, foster it, grow it, and have it benefit not just the US, but the rest of the world, and Canada, excuse me.
And if we were to put a bow on it on this conversation today, especially from MEXC's perspective, the valuable things that should emerge in the next year or two that would really assist in this mission that we have in this industry. Digital identity is number one. Mm-hmm. Having digital identity and putting custody of that identity in the hands of the consumer is really important. So they can have the assurance that they're expecting at the finance level and the consumers of the privacy they're expecting. I think that's huge. The second thing is having real institutional wealth to ensure that when we hit an all-time high, we can support the liquidity industry ride. So these order books don't get overloaded and people lose to slippage and other things as the prices crash because you just can't get people to give you cash at the price that you're locked in for. Those are two huge things that I want to see so I can very comfortably say that everything's going to be rainbows and sunshine. But leading up to that, the cost of not having those two things in place for every virtual asset service provider is higher. It's higher. It's high to operate. It's high to have customers. It's high to find customers. I think we can cross those two gaps and work side by side with the stakeholders in government and regulated to get that harmony. Now, I will leave your audience with a couple of things to look at. TRISA.io, the Travel Rule Information Sharing Alliance, TRISA.io. It's a fantastic resource for a lot of the knowledge that I try to share on the call today. So if you want to go look back, see some of their opinions on how this industry is building better for the future and how we're looking at DeFi to take some of their great technology, put a little bit of reg tech on it to make it appropriate for Tradfi, and then marry it in the middle with me at CeFi. So all of these players in the ecosystem can work harmoniously. That is the fantastic place to kind of start your journey of education. And I really appreciated you having me on today, hosting me, asking great questions. And I do hope we can do this again soon.
Absolutely. And for anyone that's watching, MEXC is a partner and affiliate we're an affiliate of MEXC Global. We appreciate everything. We appreciate Andrew Weiner, the man, the animal, the machine, coming on today. If you sign up with our affiliate link and start trading, there's a potential that you could be a guy or girl that wins $4,100. There's spot trading, options, ETFs, and you can even copy trade some of the best traders in the world. Click the link below so you can learn how. Follow us on social media. Follow MEXC Global on Twitter. We will put all that information below. And if you like this, subscribe and hit the bell notification. Andrew, thank you so much for your time.
It was a pleasure. You can find me online at MEXC_global. You can also reach me on Twitter, my own Twitter at MEXC_Andrew. I look forward to any questions people have about some of the stuff I talked about today. I would also like to hear from any of the project teams or any of the traders out there that are just very curious about what we offer. And thank you again for having us on.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming. That was an awesome conversation. I'm looking forward to the next one.
It's a pleasure.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please like and subscribe and comment below and let me know what you think. Also, you can check out these other videos for some more knowledge bombs, like this interview with Archie Finance's Paul Stravopoulos and this one with Alex Lupascu of Omnia, which is a privacy protocol. Anyways, thank you so much for watching and have an excellent day.